Hi, I'm Alex from Bainhard Guitars. This isn't really a video that I intended to make, but as a quick backstory, I'm a luthier. I work on guitars for a living, and I needed a really cheap instrument, something that I could do some experiments on for finish and repairs and the like, experimenting with techniques. So I was looking for a second-hand Epiphone or something along those lines, and I really couldn't find anything that wasn't totally beat up or just otherwise not in great condition. And I wanted something that was at least reasonably good shape. I ended up finding a guitar on eBay and realized that this was my cheapest option, was to get a brand new guitar. This was puzzling, but I bought it, and I didn't even research it or anything like that. About 20 minutes after I purchased it, I started actually looking up this guitar, and to my surprise there were tons of videos on it, mostly reviews by several notable YouTubers, kind of praising this guitar for being pretty good for what it was, or good for its price. And I noticed that a lot of these videos were sponsored, and I thought it'd be interesting from a luthier's perspective to look at this instrument before I do terrible things to it. So I thought, let's have a look at this instrument and see if it is really that good. I'm curious. Let's have a look. Now you're gonna have to excuse my messy workbench here. I actually haven't opened up the case yet. The only thing that I did was put the accessories that came with the instrument inside the bag here. I will briefly look at them. I don't really want this to be a review so much as a look at the instrument, but it actually seems relatively good quality, the strap at least. I'm not going to bother packaging it up again. And we have a lead here, and it actually looks kind of good actually. Normally when you get entry-level guitars you get those really thin black cables, and this is a Donner instrument cable, high quality pro audio cable from Donner. Apparently it's shielded, there you go, and it does kind of look like a shielded cable. This does not look bad quality at all. Which is, again, I've seen worse cables come with much higher caliber instruments. So this is my first time actually opening up the bag. An unboxing of sorts. The bag is atrocious, I'll give it that. But let's have a look at the instrument itself. I mean, reasonably well packaged actually. Okay, we've got a switch protector. And we have a guitar. I'll give you a quick look at this instrument. Okay, so this is what we have in the box. This is the Donner. And I'm just gonna say it, it's a nice looking instrument. Nicer than I probably expected it to be. There's some, sketchy work on the focus, sketchy work on the binding, but again, This is a guitar that I purchased for 148 Australian dollars, which is scary. That is incredibly affordable. So we're going to see if it's any good. Now, looking at the string height, I can already see that this action is high, but I'm really just curious to kind of feel this instrument and see how it feels. Okay, so it does look like there's been some attempt at intonation here, and again, this isn't going to be a typical review where people just play it and go, yeah, it's okay. Although I probably will do that at some point, but I'm interested again more from Luthier's perspective, how's this been put together. So first thing I want to do is check out the frets and see if they're any good. We're going to be looking for high and low frets. So far so good. Actually very good. I would laugh if these were perfectly level, because I won't name brands, but good, we have at least one high fret. I was getting concerned there that this was going to be better than some $300 guitars that I tried. Okay, we've got a few more high frets, but they're not terribly bad, I'm going to be honest. I've seen worse on name brand instruments. Okay, that one's pretty bad, so 11th is pretty high. Again, this can be addressed with a fret level, so these aren't a huge deal. But especially in the price range of beginner instruments, I am really concerned with how they play out of the box, because if you've ever seen beginner instruments, you would know that the average beginner instrument never receives a setup in its life. It will be played until the student reaches a certain level of proficiency, and then they are moved on to something, better. And that's not a bad strategy. But what it does mean is that if the instrument doesn't play well out of the box, it's probably what the student's going to be stuck with for whatever length of time they play this instrument. The high end was fantastic on this. So really beyond the 11th fret. There was one or two slightly high frets, but nothing that I would actually even say was worth, addressing. I haven't plugged this in, obviously, but I just want to feel it. So this is the back of the neck. Oh, it's kind of got this two-tone thing going. I was kind of expecting... but it actually looks kind of nice. It says it's designed by Tennessee. Crafted in China. It's designed by Tennessee. I don't know what that means. Maybe... these tuners work. They feel really interesting, and that's... I don't mean the turning action, I mean the actual tuners. They've got like this sort of, I'm not sure if you can see that, but they almost have like sort of like really unusual... These aren't like just generic Chinese tuners. I'm sure they are generic Chinese tuners, but the shape of these are a little bit unusual. They're nice. I've just tuned this by ES, it's probably nowhere close. Okay. First impression just from the playability is that this action is high, but it doesn't play too badly. I'm not sure what gauge of strings these come with. They feel like nines. They quite soft. They don't feel like good quality strings, but they play well. Oh, I just noticed something on the headstock here. This is going to be interesting. So this comes with it comes with a string action ruler. You can see that. So you can measure the action of your string in millimeters. According to this, the 12th fret is at 2.25 millimeters, and the high E is at 1.75 millimeters, which is at least looks high on this instrument. Actually, probably not as high as I was anticipating. Now, this is what a real one of these looks like. Although this is pretty good. I guess they're encouraging you to do your own setup, and from trying most of my customers' home attempted setups, they can be okay. I'm guessing that, yeah. When people tend to do setups at home, they tend to only do the action, so intonation, and the nut is usually still terribly out. We have some really, really deep nut cuts here. I'll look at that. I'm getting a bit carried away. This is a very overwhelming experience here. So let's have a look at a few things together. First things first, let's plug her in and see what kind of sounds we can get out. Now oh, that's a very stiff jack. We're going to look at that in a sec. Now, I will get this tuned. I tuned to E flat. On these is really fast. Alright, now we are using a stock microphone on this camera, so yeah, not going to get a very accurate interpretation of what this instrument sounds like. But I'll give you my thoughts on it as I give it a quick play. So we are on the neck here, and we'll take these off because they can dull the sound a bit, so let's get an accurate interpretation. I can actually see the coils on these pickups, so they're very poorly taped, so I would expect these to be pretty keen on feedback. Alright, let's give this a quick play. Alright, let's go to the middle position. Bridge. Actually, it sounds pretty nice, clean. Nicer than I was expecting. Still on the bridge. Okay, so we're going to look at intonation now. It's hard not to be overzealous with this because the tuners are really... Okay, so that's the intonation on the 12th fret of our low E. Not great. Again, just pitch and sharp, but not too bad on the A. Not acceptable, but nowhere near as bad as the E. Yeah, these are all really off. Yep, this is starting to become expected at this point. Okay, well the high E is probably the best amongst them. A lot of these things we probably come to expect on an affordable instrument. Now there's a few things that could be affecting this really bad intonation. It looks like they gave it some attempt from the factory. I'm going to give you some close-ups of the bridge later so that you can see this. So they've kind of roughly dialed it in. A high action means that when you hit the string, you're essentially bending it by the time it hits the fret, and it can pitch it sharp. So this might have something to do with it, but my guess is that this hasn't really had much of a factory setup. Generally on affordable, and even some not so affordable instruments, when they leave the factory, they're given what we call a factory safe setup. And what that generally means is a high action and relief in the neck, and this means that no matter where it goes, no matter how humid, that the guitar will play when it's put on the shelf. And that's important because a guitar with horrific fret buzz is probably not going to sell. So these factory safe setups generally mean that the guitar really needs some attention when you get it. There was probably a time where music stores used to do setups on their instruments, but in this price competitive environment where lowest price is king, it's happening less and less and less. So the instruments are getting better and better and better, and the factory setups are actually getting pretty good too, but the chances of you getting a store setup out of the box is almost nil these days. At least in Australia. It might be different wherever you are. So there's a few things I would like to do. I want to get the control cavities off, have a look at the pots and the switch. I would like to show you at least how it's been set up, and then I would like to pull the pickups out and have a look behind them as well, I guess. Let's do it. Okay, so we have a neck angle in here. It is a bolt-on neck, and your tunematic design, as if you bought a Fender, as if you bought a Gibson or a higher-end Epiphone, generally is a glue neck design. They've kind of got the neck angle in here, and it looks odd because you can really see the pitch because you can see the wood sticking up on this side. Just small little aesthetic details like that, which I guess just look a bit strange. We've got some relatively deep nut cuts from the factory. All things that can be tended to. This is what the bridge looks like straight out of the factory. with the factory setup. Now, again, looking at that, it looks like it's just had some roughed in intonation before it was installed, which again is better than what I've seen on some instruments. Pickup heights are actually pretty good. Looks like someone actually bothered when they put this together. There's a certain attention to detail here that you just wouldn't expect in this price range, which is really, really nice to see. I want to get the back off this and have a look at the electronics. Welcome to the electronics cavity of the Donner. This is exactly what I expected. We have some no-name Chinese pots in there and relatively okay soldering. The switch is not straight on the front either. The switch is just, you know, twisted. But I'm impressed at least that the soldering looks kind of confident. The switch is a generic Chinese switch. Now I noticed that this was really stiff when I plugged in earlier. So just to give you, it's hard to do one hand. So when I'm plugging in here, it's not really clearing the wires. That's not ideal. You know, just need some cable management inside and she would be okay. Now we can have a look at how the finish has been applied from in here as well. Honestly, pretty well. In this price range, you would expect to see some sort of quality issues behind the for that, but it's pretty much as expected. Would this sound better if you upgraded the electronics? Maybe, maybe not. But the pickup sounds surprisingly good. The switch actually even looks surprisingly good for a generic switch. I've definitely seen worse. So an amazing bang for buck so far. Okay, so we're gonna have a look at the pickguards. Not pickguards, sorry, we're gonna look at the pickups. I'm just gonna take it out by the pickup rings here. And I probably should, actually I definitely should, put all the screws for this instrument in a safe place so we don't lose them, because there's nothing more annoying. Looking at this finish more and more, I'm guessing it has a sort of photo finish or veneer top, but the wood doesn't look good enough to be a photo finish. It looks like a sort of cheap grain, so I'm guessing it's like a veneer. Maybe we'll see when we take out the pickup rings. Maybe we won't. Depends how they've done the finish. I'm really not expecting to see much in here. I don't think we're going to see any branding or anything. But let's find out. Alright, so we have a pickup here which is labelled J. And it looks like your typical cheap generic Chinese pickup. Don't know what else to tell you other than that. And this one is labelled N, and it looks like a slightly dirtier version of the same thing. Yeah, these don't look terribly bad or terribly amazing. So this is the inside, and hard to tell if it's got a veneer or it might actually just be the natural grain the more I look at it. If so, that's actually really impressive because it's really nicely sunbursted. The inside, interestingly, on the neck pocket, this one has finish inside the actual pickup cavity, and this one looks like someone either protected it or had to take a router to it post finishing, but to deepen the pocket. Possibly the pocket was deepened after spraying, because there's signs here of where the paint did touch it, so it's interesting why. Interesting. Let's take the neck off and see what lies under there. So we're just pulling the back off. Off the donor. And we'll see what the neck pocket has to say. I'm actually pretty impressed by the quality of the engraving on the back of here. Pretty nice. I still haven't figured out what designed by Tennessee means, but I'm sure we'll never figure it out. Who am I kidding? Okay. There's the I'll show it, there we go. There's the donor backplate. It's pretty nice. Alright, let's flip this around maybe. Tail piece fell off. No clips on these. Alright, here we go. It's actually in there pretty tight. Like really tight tolerance. Alright, here we go. Now, I was expecting to see a shim in here, but this has to be a first. Absolutely, this has to be a first. Because the shim inside this instrument appears to be a piece of actual veneer. And this veneer is going to answer my questions, because the grain on this matches the top. So I think the top is veneered. It also appears to be glued in. And I don't... see if I can... I'm probably just going to destroy this, but I don't really care. There are proper ways of removing this, but no, it's been glued in, and I'm not going to destroy it on camera for no good reason. I'll get it off properly later. So I'm impressed that they actually used a piece of veneer to shim. I'm not impressed that they glued it. It's a bit, you know. What they normally use on guitars of this level is offcuts of sandpaper. You usually get offcuts of sandpaper or just plain old cardboard. So this is a welcome change. It's also usually not glued in. This one's glued in. I don't generally like shims like this because they do leave a massive air pocket. You know, so I like to actually have the shim angled and so that you basically have complete contact the entire way through, so that you have as much neck contact as possible. Kind of making it more like a glue-in joint in that you have complete and utter contact. You know, you can debate amongst yourselves whether or not it has any... Alright, so the branding on the base of the saddle pieces is SAR, S-A-R. Again, it actually fits on nicely. A lot of these almost feel like they've been hand drilled in and you gotta sort of battle them on. overall, you have to argue that the build quality on this, for the price, is really not bad. Just gonna take this off so you can see. You can see the wood's pretty soft and it's left sort of indentations from where the pocket is. Again, you expect that in this price range. In conclusion with this guitar, you hear a lot of things when you see reviews where they say things like, it's a good guitar for the money. What does that mean? What is the comparison point? Are you saying it's good compared to a $200 guitar, or good compared to what? So if your expectation is that for the money it's going to be terrible and it turns out to only be bad, you may say that a guitar is good for the money. So it's a bit of an unusual way of describing a guitar. Rather than bring the monetary aspect into it, I'm just going to ask a more basic question: is it a good guitar? And my honest answer, with no sponsorship, and this is all just my personal opinion, is that it's not a bad guitar, but it's not a good guitar. I say that because out of the box there are certain playability issues, and as we kind of know, most beginners are not going to go get their instrument professionally set up. So is it a good guitar for a beginner? I wouldn't recommend it. However, if you're prepared to put some resources into this instrument, take it to a local luthier or guitar tech who can give it a setup, this changes things dramatically, and this guitar becomes a real excellent deal. Because with a fairly basic setup, this instrument could be played much better. But I don't want to judge an instrument on its potential, I just want to judge it on how it came out of the box. And out of the box, it didn't play well enough that I would want to give it to a beginner. Out of the box, there are a few issues that for me aren't present on guitars that are worth $70 to $90 more, which is still incredibly affordable. That being said, at 148 Australian dollars, this is an absolutely amazing guitar, especially with a setup. You would still have a lot of money left over. I mean, if you buy one of those better instruments I specified, they will play better out of the box, but really you should get them as a setup too. A setup is still going to set you back around $100. I'm speaking in Australian dollars. So if you're actually going to be a beginner who actually gets a setup, then these actually represent good value for money. I wouldn't expect them to sound amazing, but I was impressed by the sound on the stock strings and the pickups. They didn't sound particularly muddy or dark as affordable guitars tend to. It sounded kind of pleasant. Other things that I don't really like is that the pickups around here completely push it up against the neck and has like zero protection. There was actually quite a bit of pressure. You can actually see that. Well, maybe you can't with the angle. Probably very difficult to see, but the neck was actually pushing on this a little bit because it was slanted up and it has deformed the pickup ring. These don't affect the playability. They're just annoying. The quality of the paint is nice. It is a good looking instrument. So if you're prepared to get a setup, spend the money on it, or you aren't a beginner and you already know how to do setups or things like that, then yeah, this is a fantastic instrument and I think its potential is incredible. If I was actually going to make this a playing instrument, I would give it a fret level. That is exactly what I would do. I'd give it a fret level, I would give it a full setup, and I would probably put something like Tone Rider, fairly affordable pickups into there and upgrade the electronics. And all this could be done on a relative budget, and I wouldn't say it was worthwhile doing on this, but if I was actually going to keep this instrument for its intended purpose of being an instrument, that is what I would do to it, and I think its potential for something like that is incredible. So that is Luthier's take on this instrument. kind of what you expect, but a bit better. Well, I've been Alex from Bainhart Guitars. You can let me know what you think in the comments. If you have one of these guitars and have experience with them, I'd be really interested in seeing how it's held up for you longer term. But yeah, there's plenty of other videos on these guitars, and I figured once I bought this that it was going to be worth checking out, and I'm kind of really glad that I did. Pleasantly surprised.